It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater, and welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. Today, we are in the nonprofit series. This is a series that is so near and dear to my heart. And for those of you who are just joining in, you are going to fall in love with it. Trust me on this. During the holidays, we highlight a series of nonprofit organizations. And this is the very first year that we're doing it on Her Success Story, as well as our LinkedIn Live show, Slater Success Live. So if you're curious, you want to check it out on both platforms. Today, we are highlighting Coker Powell. Coker is a forward-thinking development leader with a highly successful track record in creating and executing strategic plans to drive organizational growth and innovation. She joined in 2015. She joined the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, an organization that is near to dear to my heart on a variety of personal levels, and has led the development of a variety of their programs that she's going to share with us today. Also share with us a little bit of her background and how she got started and how this became part of her mission in life. Coker, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ivy. I'm thrilled to be here, and hello to all of your listeners.
So tell me a little, so how did you get involved in the nonprofit world? Where did this become a career strategy for you?
You know, it's interesting. Ivy, I grew up in a family where my dad was a physician and always had an interest in medicine and helping others. And when I got to college, I fully had every intent in the world that I was going to be a doctor. And then I took organic chemistry and was like, perhaps I don't want to be a doctor. I'm not really sure that this is the path for me, but I always had a passion for medicine and for healthcare and in that realm. And as I progressed through my college career, I actually started thinking I would go into the legal profession. And my senior year at Wofford College, I was the president of Panhellenic. And one of my responsibilities was to do a fundraiser. And the fundraiser that I chose to do, and I was kind of picking a nonprofit out of a hat to support, and I chose the American Heart Association because my grandfather, who I just had such a close relationship with, had just had a heart attack. And so I thought, how about the American Heart Association? And so did a great fundraiser for the college, was the most successful fundraiser to that point that Panhellenic had executed. And my advisor, who I just loved, sat me down and said, I just don't know that law school is the right path for you. He said, look at how you were able to really mobilize an entire campus to do good and to raise revenue for a cause. And maybe you should think about doing this as a career. And that was a defining moment for me. I will never forget that day or that conversation. At that, I was studying for the LSAT, and I really thought about what he said and changed course. And so instead went to graduate school for communications and public relations, and really started thinking about nonprofit. And when I came out of school, the first thought that I had was back to the American Heart Association, where I had done that fundraising my senior year in college, and got the first job in nonprofit fundraising with Heart right out of school. And that really was how my nonprofit career got started. And it was an interesting full circle moment in a way, because I was starting and was still in the healthcare world, still in the healthcare arena, but really on the business side as opposed to the provider side. And it's been a really great fit for me, over the last nearly 20 years.
So you joined LLS, which I will just, listeners, so
Yes.
LLS is short for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. So as you hear Coker and I chat, you will know what we're talking about. You joined this organization back in 2015, and you have made massive headway as far as fundraising and initiatives, and this is such your sweet spot. Share a little bit, because we don't always ask about like the fundraising initiatives and the programs. And this is a large organization. And how did you get started with doing this and expanding on that?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it really, I'll take it back one step. So really my nonprofit career, as I shared moments ago, started with the American Heart Association. And through that journey, I spent 13 years there. I was in a variety of fundraising roles, from on the ground entry level staff fundraiser to taking on more and more responsibility. And since here we sit in December, I got a call on December the 23rd. I remember it, asking me if I would be interested in coming to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And honestly, Ivy, at that point, I really thought I would be at Heart for the rest of my career. But I listened to the call because one of my very favorite family members, who was so special and close to me, had recently been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so it was a moment, another one of those defining moments where I really listened to the opportunity, and I was open to the opportunity to go to LLS. And so that's what led me to LLS. But to go back and to answer your question, I went to LLS to really help them grow and reinvigorate their walk fundraising program, which was their primary fundraiser, which it is for many nonprofits, in the peer-to-peer fundraising space. And, to me, what is so exciting about development and fundraising is that just like I wanted to do something to help advance healthcare and be in that world. I think that one of the things that's so powerful in peer-to-peer fundraising is that we have people who say, okay, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, but I know somebody that I care about, that I love, who has been impacted by a certain disease, a certain condition, in this case by cancer and by blood cancer. And peer-to-peer fundraising really allows people to do something, to be active, to help make an impact in a way that any of us can do. Any of us can help advance cures and research and patient support by joining one of our campaign events. And so, it's been exciting to say, how do we do that in the most impactful way? So how do we reach the most people? How do we have the best event experience? How do we ensure that when people come to one of our events, they understand who we are as an organization, they understand the mission, and they understand the impact they're making on that mission, and that they then go and tell others to join and support and be part of one of our campaigns. And LLS is such an incredible organization. We have so many different services for patients, and I am just so incredibly proud of. And I really see the role of the campaign team and the development team as bringing people through the front door of our house so that they can get to know and understand the services that we provide, so that if they know somebody or if they themselves happen to need our services, that they understand who we are as an organization and can lead them to us so that we can help them at a dark time in their life when they get a cancer diagnosis.
And it's unfortunately hard to not to know somebody who's been through some type of cancer. I know I've had several family and friends over the years who have been touched by lymphoma or leukemia. And I think one of the things that our listeners should know is to understand why it's looped together, that lymphoma and leukemia are both blood cancers. And that most people, and because I remember I asked the question early on, it's like, why are you guys always together? What's the correlation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we laugh sometimes at LLS and think, you know, do some people even, leukemia is a hard word to even know how to spell, much less, to understand all the intricacies. And so why are we lumped together? So there are over 100 different types of blood cancers. The largest buckets of blood cancer are leukemia and lymphoma, but there's a third big bucket, which your listeners may be familiar with, which is myeloma. And we also conduct research and services and patients for that too. And essentially, the reason that they're lumped together is just because they're the two primary, two of the three primary types of blood cancers. And so, and really, the way that we started, so the way that the organization began was really through a family in New York whose child was diagnosed with leukemia. And unfortunately did not survive. And so our organization started from the love of a family who wanted to do something. We talk, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, the power of peer-to-peer fundraising. It's where, the everyday person wants to do something when somebody has a disease. And so that's how we were born. So we started with just leukemia in our name, but then eventually morphed into adding lymphoma to our name because we had so many people who were living with a lymphoma, which is also a blood cancer, saying, well, wait, do you also help lymphoma? And, Ivy, who knows what's in the future, but I could certainly see us at some point incorporating myeloma into our name. Who knows? Because we certainly also, we're focused on all those different buckets and blood cancer in general as an overall disease state.
So I have to highlight, and listeners, you can all check this out in Coker's bio below. But, some of your initiatives that you have done with LLS has resulted in $250 million in fundraising. That's huge. That's impactful. You're an amazing woman. On a big scale, it's, it's so easy to say it starts with $1. But how does $1 turn into 250 million? How many programs are you guys running? How are you managing this all?
Sure. Well, and I can talk about our peer-to-peer campaigns. So, how do we reach consumers? And it starts there. We have a handful of really primarily 5 ways that our peer-to-peer campaigns. So we have LightThe Night, which is our flagship community event where we are bringing people all throughout the community together to raise revenue, for the organization by asking friends. It's that peer-to-peer campaign. So asking friends and family to support you and to donate to you. And, our average gift is $73. So, if you think about that, $250 million, $73 at a time, requires a lot of people who are, supporting the organization. And we are so indebted to our participants who open their networks and their portfolios and ask their friends and family to give and to support LLS. But LightThe Night is our flagship event that happens in communities all across the country and also in Canada, where people come together for an evening. It's a beautiful, breathtaking, emotional experience where people hold illuminated lanterns based on their connection to the disease, whether they have been a patient themselves, they've lost someone, or they are there to support our patients who are going through a blood cancer diagnosis. And it is truly about an inspirational evening about bringing light to the darkness of cancer. And I really believe that LLS is the brightest light in the cancer space because of the impact that we have made and the way that we change patients' lives. And so that's LightThe Night. That is our primary big event. We also have a big climb that happens in the spring where people literally climb stairwells or stadiums. And so it's a really fun, high energy athletic event to raise revenue for LLS. We have our Students of the Year campaign, which is an incredible campaign for high school students who come together. They build teams, a team of their friends, and for 7 weeks they are competing against one another to build a business plan to raise revenue, and then to go on to see how much money they can raise it, through this business plan that they built. And I'll tell you, the thing that has been so remarkable to me about Students of the Year is just watching what the youth of tomorrow can do and what they can accomplish. And so,
and that's such a win-win, Coker. It is such a win-win, because what the students are learning and the exposure, and being real, leukemia and lymphoma is something that hits young people. It is something that shows up in their peers, and giving them an opportunity to make a difference there, as well as giving them an opportunity to learn the business portion of raising money and building a business plan and a strategy. It is a gift that gives in so many directions.
Mm-hmm. You're so right about that. I think this is a program that it's really taken off in the last few years. And I think it's the program that in many ways we are just so proud of because of what you just shared. And you're right. So 40% of all pediatric cancers are blood cancers. So chances are, if somebody who is a youth knows someone who's had cancer that is their peer, it's probably a blood cancer. And so for them to be active and to be able to say, no, we don't want, we want to see the end of cancer in our lifetime, and giving the empowerment to a high school student is so incredibly powerful. And so they work with mentors to build a business plan. They build teams. So it's building, it's teamwork, it is initiative, it's sales, it's drive, it's collaboration. I mean, it's so many things that they get out of this program. And, one of the recent stories really speaks to me. So we had a guy, a 14-year-old kid out of Baltimore who ran for Students of the Year, and he came up with this business plan, had his cousins help him, some other colleagues or some other friends of his, that, classmates of his. And in 7 weeks, so he built a business plan to do a kite festival in Baltimore. Ooh. So literally come fly a kite. And so he did the promotion for it. He got sponsorship for it. He built a team of others to help him put this on. And Ivy, in 7 weeks, this student raised over $400,000. And
wow.
It's just remarkable what these students can do. And, I will never forget, as he was crowned the Student of the Year, hearing from his mom. And his mom got on stage and she was talking about just what this experience has meant to their family and to him in particular. And she said, that he was always a very introverted, shy kiddo, and that this experience really improved his confidence. It made him, it really refined and polished and his leadership skills and just what he gave out of it. She was so humble, and she said, you all are sitting here thanking us for this $400,000 plus check, but what you gave to our family and to our child is going to set him up to be a leader for the rest of his life. And that is
golden. That is golden when you make that kind of impact. So I have to ask you, so coming into 2022 is in this world we've had some interesting times in the last, year and a half or so.
Yeah.
What is some of the vision and goals for LLS moving into 2022?
Well, thank you. And, it has been a very tough year. The COVID pandemic has really rocked the world of nonprofit fundraising. The bulk of nonprofit fundraising in the past has come through these events that I'm talking to you about. As we gather people together in big crowds, and I think
a kite festival,
2020, right? A kite festival, a walk, an experience,
running stairs together.
Right? Exactly. And to all of a sudden just boom, the rug got pulled out from underneath the entire industry of, we can't have these events with thousands and thousands of people. It just can't happen. And so we had to pivot very quickly. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of LLS for, is that we did not hesitate. We did not pause. We very quickly figured out how to move into the virtual space. And, what I think is so, one of the things that I'm so proud of is that last year, so in the midst of the pandemic, we actually had our best year ever financially without a single event in person.
Wow. I have to stop you right there because that is wild and impactful. And I have clients that are nonprofits. There's a ton of nonprofits I'm involved in. And many, many more nonprofits I speak to all the time, not just this time of year. And it has been tough in the nonprofit fundraising. So it thrills me. I'm like tickled pink by this news. So what are you guys doing next? Like, what did you learn and how do you take that forward?
Exactly. Well, and I think that, really was kind of the background to helping answer your next question, which is where are we going? And I think that what we learned through all of that is, wow, we can have really impactful fundraising numbers without having an in-person event. Doesn't mean we're not going to have in-person events. I think there's so much power in convening people together. So we will return to in-person events, but it also really challenged us to think about how we do things differently, how we raise revenue differently. It really pushed us to think about, every single expense that we take on as a nonprofit, because here's the thing that was also really, really, really neat was not only did we have our best financial year ever in the history of the organization, but we also had the lowest expenses we've ever had in the history of the organization because we didn't have any events.
So your profits were up, right? Your profit value was up because events cost money to produce.
Correct. Our profit margin was through the roof. And so we had the most money and the highest profit we've ever had. And so it does make us really think about how do we continue to raise money in a way that where there's no cost to creating that money. I mean, how do we continue to bring people together, but really challenging us to invest more in virtual fundraising and direct to consumer type fundraising so that we can continue to fuel as much money and profit to the mission as we possibly can. And so while we're excited to have our in-person events return, it really pushed us and challenged our thinking that we have to start thinking about new ways so that we can continue to deliver as much of that margin to the mission as we possibly can.
So one other thing to ask you about, because this is just something we were talking about, and I think it's important to our listeners to understand the work of LLS. We've been talking about the fundraising and the nonprofit portion of what you do, Coker, in raising the funds, but the impact of the funds. So the FDA, we never really talked so much about the FDA until the last year and a half.
Right.
Now all of a sudden we talk about the FDA, and the FDA has really supported you, and it's shifting the impact that LLS is making. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's important to know.
Absolutely. And so, in a typical year, the FDA we might have one, maybe two approvals in the blood cancer space. If we have 3 approvals, we are doing toe touches. We're so excited. But one of the things that our CEO has been, Dr. Lou DeJaneiro, has been so focused on is 1 to 2 to maybe 3 is not going to cut it. Like, we have to accelerate the number of therapies that are getting approved. How do we accelerate approvals so that those therapies can get to patients and ultimately help save and improve their lives? And so we have, our CEO launched over a decade ago something called the Therapy Acceleration Program, or TAP, which is about how do we work with the FDA to figure out how to bring therapies to patients faster. And one of the things that I'm so excited about, so if you think about 1, 2, maybe 3 is great. Last year, there were 17 therapies that were approved by the FDA, and LLS funded 14 of those. So really, when you talk about changing the game, and, Ivy, the other thing that I would point out here, when I talked about that call that I got in December that brought me to LLS, and the reason that I thought about, and really took the phone call seriously was because of this family member who I cared so much about. When I came and met with Dr. Lou, the CEO, and he told me about the mission of the organization and why LLS is so important in the space, I knew that this was where I needed to come and where I wanted to be as the next part of my career. And so the way that he explained it to me was LLS is typically, we call it the tip of the spear, because we are the organization who typically therapies hit blood cancer first, and then they go on to help other cancers. Now, why is that? Number one, the blood is so accessible. So if you think about researchers, scientists who are sitting in a lab trying to figure out a cure for cancer, they can very quickly get to blood to test things, to see, is this working? If it's not, how do we tweak this? Whereas going in and getting access to a hard tumor is much more challenging. It requires surgery. It's harder for the patient.
Much more invasive.
And also, yep, it's more invasive. It's a lot harder to get to, whereas the blood is so accessible. But also blood cancer, the way that he described it to me as a lay fundraiser, is that when blood cancer is outside of the body, it has this, it's exactly the same as it is inside the body. Whereas for hard tumors, so if you took a tumor from the breast or the colon or somewhere else, it changes composition outside the body. So what scientists are doing in the lab may or may not translate. So oftentimes we see therapies progress fastest and first in blood cancer, and then they go on to help other cancers. So, CAR T therapy is one of those it originated in blood cancer. LLS funded the scientist when nobody else would, because we believed in his idea, Dr. Carl June. And so, CAR T therapy was an idea and a concept that started in blood cancer, and now, CAR T and immunotherapy is going on to help brain cancer and colon cancer and all these other types of cancers. And so we are the tip of the spear. So if you can, if you think about why LLS, it's because if you really care about curing cancer and advancing cancer, investing in our research has a massive ripple effect and trickle down effect to all other cancers. And so when he talked to me about that, I was sold immediately, and I knew that this was the organization that I wanted to be a part of. And I just see how our work is changing and impacting and saving lives at such an accelerated rate. It's a fantastic place to be, and it's a fantastic investment for any of your listeners who want to care about or who care about curing cancer.
So Coker, for our listeners who are intrigued, who have leaned in and said, wow, I want to know more, how could they find out more about LLS and potentially get involved?
Sure. So the quickest way is to go to lls.org, where you can learn all about the work of our organization, where you can learn about our events. So if you want to get involved in one of our events in your local area, or also just know about the organization in general. One of the other things that I think is important for your listeners to know, if you have somebody who is living with a blood cancer in your life, or who has just been recently diagnosed with a blood cancer, on our website, you can find information about our Information Resource Center. And this is such a jewel and a gem, and something we're so proud of. So if a patient or a caregiver calls the IRC, Information Resource Center, they can get we have nurses online who can help with everything from helping you figure out financial assistance for your travel, or for the drugs or the therapies that you might need. We have a clinical trial support center where you can literally call the IRC, and they can take information down about what you're dealing with, your diagnosis, and find and connect you to clinical trials all across the country. That is a service that others would charge thousands and thousands of dollars for. Everything we do for our patients is completely free. And so that is just a gem and a jewel of a resource for your listeners to know about.
Fabulous. And listeners, what I always say is, take a moment, digest this. Take a deep breath and say, what did you take away from listening to Coker and I chat about LLS, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society? Who do you know this has impacted? What is intriguing to you? And then share with us in the comments below what you took away from listening today and what's the action you're going to take from that. Because it's great that we're all listening to wonderful things and there's fabulous information out there. But know what we're listening to, how it impacts us, and the actions we take is how we take things forward. Remember to check the entire bio out on Coker. She has some fabulous, fabulous things she has done in this world, as well as check out LLS and see how you can make an impact. Know that the nonprofit series is not always just about giving money. It's about giving of ourselves. It's about how we get involved, possibly seeing if there's a student in your high school in your area that is involved and you could just support them. Maybe you have some business experience and they're organizing their business plan that you could bring to the table. Everything we do, every way we show up has a ripple impact and a ripple effect, and we're in this together. Coker, thank you for taking the time out of a very busy schedule to join me here today on Her Success Story.
Thank you for having me, Ivy, and thanks to all of your listeners for listening. And I hope that if you have any information about LLS or anybody in your life who is suffering from blood cancer, that you connect them to us so that we can help in any way that we can. So thank you, Ivy, and thanks to all your viewers.
Thank you. And if this made an impact on you, remember to share it forward to your community. Check out our other Her Success Story nonprofit series, as well as Slater Success Live on LinkedIn. And I look forward to seeing you on the next Her Success Story.